Once upon a time, there lived a young girl named Adaobi, just 19 years old. She was the kind of girl who never complained, even when life gave her nothing to smile about. She had big brown eyes that always looked tired but still gentle, and she moved like someone who had learned to carry sadness without making noise. Since the day her parents died, she had lived with her aunt, Madame Nena, in a small house at the edge of the village. Adaobi was not lazy. In fact, she worked harder than any girl her age. Every morning before the cock crowed, she would sweep the compound, fetch water from the faraway stream, and prepare hot water for her aunt. After that, she would wash the clothes, clean the kitchen, and head to the market to sell peppers in a small basket. But no matter what she did, her aunt never said thank you. Madame Nena only shouted, insulted, or reminded her that she was just a useless orphan eating her food. The neighbors saw everything, but nobody ever said a word. That's how the world was. People looked away when it was not their problem. That morning, something felt different. Adaobi had just come back from the stream. Her wrapper was soaked at the bottom, her hands red from carrying the heavy buckets. As she poured the water into the drum behind the house, she heard whispers coming from inside the room. Her aunt was talking with someone. "She will marry him today," Madame Nena said in a low, sharp voice. Adaobi froze. She didn't understand what she meant. Who was marrying who? She crept closer and pressed her ear near the wooden window. She has no one. No mother, no father. Let her marry him. He has brought the bride price in cash, Nena said. Adaobi's heart dropped. She stepped back slowly, shaking. Her hands were still dripping from the stream water, but she didn't notice. Her chest rose and fell as if she had just run a long distance. That afternoon, Adaobi stayed quiet. She didn't ask questions. She just kept watching. Her aunt was too excited to hide it. She wore her best lace blouse and tied a bright yellow head tie. She brought out a cooler of jollof rice and meat from the kitchen, food Adaobi had never even tasted in that house. Then as the sun started to drop, a man arrived. He was nothing like Adaobi had imagined a husband to be. The man was old, maybe 50. His slippers were torn on one side. His trousers were too short. His shirt was clean but very old. His skin was dark and rough from years of farm work. His eyes were quiet and his mouth never smiled. The villagers started to gather near the compound as if they had been waiting for the show. Some women covered their mouths whispering. A few children pointed and laughed. Even the old men shook their heads and clicked their tongues. Madame Nena came out with powder all over her face, fanning herself with pride. "Come out, Adaobi," she shouted. "Your husband is here." Adaobi didn't move. She stayed inside the small back room, holding the wooden bedpost with both hands. Her legs were weak. Her lips were trembling. She kept saying to herself, "It's not true. They're just joking." But it wasn't a joke. Madame Nena stormed into the room and pulled her out by the arm. "You will not disgrace me today. Do you think I raised you for nothing?" Adaobi stumbled as she followed her aunt into the open yard. The old man was already waiting with a bottle of schnapps in his hand. A small table had been set with cola nuts and drinks. 3 elders from the village were seated, nodding slowly, acting like everything was normal. "Adaobi," one of them said, "this is your husband, Mazi Chukwuemeka. Today, we give you to him. Your aunt has agreed." Adaobi shook her head, her voice cracking. "I don't want to marry him. Please, I'm not ready. He's too old. He's older than my father was." The crowd murmured, some giggling, others shaking their heads. Madame Nena grabbed her wrist tightly. "You will marry him today or leave my house this night," she hissed through her teeth. "You think you're better than everyone? You think I will feed you forever?" Adaobi turned to the villagers. Her eyes searched for help, but no one stepped forward. Even the pastor's wife stood there with arms folded, saying nothing. The same people who once promised to protect her after her parents died were now watching her pain like a market drama. Mazi Chukwuemeka didn't say much. He only looked at her, not with anger, not with happiness, just silence. He held out the ring. The elders started the prayers. As they placed the cheap ring on Adaobi's finger, tears ran down her face. She didn't even wipe them. She just stood there shaking, her hands cold, her mind far away. After the ceremony, Adaobi was told to pack her things. A small nylon bag with 2 wrappers, 1 old shoe, and a Bible was all she had. Her aunt didn't even give her food for the journey. Go and be a good wife, Nena said with a fake smile. If you misbehave, don't come back here. You are no longer my problem. As Adaobi followed Mazi Chukwuemeka out of the compound, the villagers clapped softly, some laughing behind their wrappers. One woman whispered, "She married a palm wine tapper. Let's see how long that will last." Another man said, "A poor man and a poor girl. What a perfect match." No one saw the brokenness in her eyes. No one cared about the dreams she buried that day. They walked in silence. The road to his house was far. Not a single bike passed. Adaobi walked behind him, her legs weak from fear and sadness. Her eyes kept filling up with tears, but she refused to let them fall again. When they reached the house, it was even worse than she had imagined. A small one-room building with a zinc roof full of holes. The door creaked when it opened. Inside there was only a mat, a stool, and one small lantern. "This is your home now," Mazi Chukwuemeka said gently. Adobe looked around, biting her lip to stop it from trembling. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But where would she go? There was no bed, no food, no cupboard, just 4 cracked walls and silence. Mazi Chukwuemeka noticed her fear but said nothing. Instead, he brought out a clean wrapper and handed it to her. "You can rest. I will cook," he said. Adobe stared at him, confused. He didn't touch her. He didn't raise his voice. He just went outside to make a fire. That night, they ate quietly. The food was plain, just yam and palm oil. But it was warm. She didn't sleep. She lay on the mat with her back to the wall, watching him through the darkness. He sat by the door, his eyes looking at the stars. Adobe didn't understand him. He wasn't like other men. He didn't act like someone who had just bought a wife. He didn't smile or laugh or shout. He didn't even look happy. She wondered why he married her. What kind of man agrees to marry a girl who was crying during her own wedding? Her mind kept asking questions, but the biggest one was this. Who exactly is Mazi Chukwuemeka? And why did he look like a poor man who wasn't really poor? The next morning, Adobe woke up before the sun. Her body ached from sleeping on the cold mat, and her back felt stiff from the hard floor. She sat up slowly, blinking at the dim yellow light of the lantern that had burned all night in the corner of the room. Everything around her was quiet, too quiet. Even the usual noise of morning birds felt distant, like the world itself was holding its breath. She looked around the room again. Nothing had changed. Just one mat, one stool, one lantern. The walls were bare. No calendars, no photos, no sign that anyone had lived here for long. She turned her head slowly. Mazi Chukwuemeka was already awake. He was sitting by the door again, staring outside like he hadn't moved at all. He was dressed in the same old clothes, and his slippers were neatly placed beside him. Adaobi didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to call him. Should she say, "My husband"? Should she call him "Sir"? He wasn't her father. He wasn't her friend. He was a stranger, a quiet, older stranger who had bought her like firewood in the market. She stood up and wrapped her old wrapper tightly around herself. Then she cleared her throat gently and spoke. "Good morning." Chukwuemeka turned to her and nodded once. "Good morning, Adaobi. Did you sleep?" "A little," she replied, her voice small. He looked at her for a second longer, then stood up slowly. "I boiled some water. You can bathe." Adaobi blinked in surprise. No shouting, no commands, no insults like her aunt used to throw every morning. She just nodded, then walked outside carefully. At the back of the small house, behind a piece of hanging cloth, she found the bucket of hot water beside a plastic bowl. She bathed quickly, her heart still confused by everything. By the time she stepped back into the house, he was already sweeping the front yard. She stood there watching him. A 50-year-old man, sweeping gently like he had nowhere to be. No hurry, no anger. He didn't act like a man who just got a new wife. He didn't smile or touch her. He barely even looked at her. She slowly walked to the stool and sat down. He came back inside, picked up a small black kettle, and poured hot water into 2 cups. "I hope you take tea," he said quietly. "I do," she answered. He handed her a steaming cup without saying another word. They sat there in silence, blowing into their cups. Adaobi finally gathered the courage to ask, "Why did you agree to marry me?" Chukwuemeka paused. He didn't look up. He just stared into his tea. Because you had no one else, he said softly. That answer confused her even more. But you don't even know me. I didn't need to, he said. Adobe blinked. So you just saw me and said yes? Chukwuemeka looked up this time. His eyes were calm, almost sad. I saw how they treated you. I saw you at the stream one morning, carrying 2 buckets on your head while your aunt walked behind you with an umbrella. I saw your face. You didn't cry, but you were tired. Adobe's lips parted, but no sound came out. I've lived in this village for 10 years, Adobe. I know pain when I see it. She sat back slowly, holding the cup tighter in her hands. And you thought marriage would save me? No, he said, but at least it would give you peace. Adobe didn't speak for a long time after that. Later that day, he showed her around the compound. There wasn't much. A small backyard garden, a wooden bench under the mango tree, a tap that only worked once a week, a tiny storeroom with a lock on it. This room stays locked, he said simply. You don't need to worry about it. Adobe nodded, though her mind lingered on the door. What was in there? Why did it sound like he had secrets? They walked back inside together. That afternoon, she offered to cook. You don't need to, he said. I want to, she replied. He handed her a small bag of gari, some dry fish, and palm oil. That was all they had. She cooked with shaky hands, not sure if she was doing it right. When she served the food, he nodded again. Thank you. She almost dropped the spoon. No one had said thank you to her in years. That night, they ate in silence again. When it was time to sleep, he stood up and picked a wrapper. You take the mat. I'll sleep outside, he said. No, she replied quickly. You don't have to. But he shook his head. It's all right. I'm used to it. He stepped outside with the wrapper and lay down on the bench under the tree. Adobe watched him from the doorway. This man confused her. He treated her kindly, but he barely spoke. He gave her space, but locked doors behind him. He walked like a poor man, yet carried himself like someone used to being respected. The next day, something strange happened. She went to sweep the front yard and found a small white envelope on the bench. It had no name, just a blue wax seal. She picked it up and turned it over carefully. Before she could open it, Chukwuemeka came from behind her and gently took it from her hand. That's not for you, he said softly, not angry, just firm. I didn't know, she replied quickly. He placed the letter into his pocket and walked inside. Adobe stood still for a long time. Where was the letter from? Why was it sealed like something from a palace? She followed him into the house. Who sent that? He didn't answer. Is it from your family? Still no answer. Adobe stepped closer. Please, Mazi, I just want to understand. He finally looked at her, his eyes now sharper than before. Don't ask about things that can put you in danger. Adobe froze. What danger? She whispered. Chukwuemeka looked away. You don't need to know. Not now. He walked to the storeroom, the same one he told her never to enter, and opened the lock with a small key he kept on his waist. She peeped just a little. Inside, she caught a glimpse of something strange. 2 metal boxes, a long brown bag that looked like it could carry something heavy, and a black coat with golden buttons. Before she could see more, he shut the door and locked it again. That night, Adobe couldn't sleep. She lay on the mat, staring at the ceiling, her heart racing with questions. Who was this man? Was he hiding something? Why did he move like a ghost? And what kind of danger was he talking about? The next 2 days moved slowly. Chukwuemeka barely spoke. He only nodded or gave short answers. He cooked simple food, cleaned the house, and never touched her. But every night, more envelopes arrived. She saw them under the door, on the bench, even one tucked inside the lantern's base. Always the same. White paper, blue wax seal. He always collected them before she could touch them. Adobe became restless. On the 4th night, she decided to ask again. As he sat outside under the tree, she walked up to him and stood beside the bench. Please, she said, if I'm your wife, I have the right to know what's going on. He looked up at her, his face tired. You do have the right, and I will tell you. Very soon. When? He didn't answer. Please, I'm scared, she said. You talk like a man who's being watched. He looked into her eyes and said quietly, because I am. Adobe stepped back, her hands shaking. Watched by who? He sighed and looked up at the moon. People I used to know. People who think I'm dead. People who want me to stay forgotten. Adaobi's lips trembled. So you're not who you say you are? He smiled sadly. I've never said who I am. She sat beside him slowly. Then tell me now. He was quiet for a long time. Then he whispered, wait till the 5th day. Then I'll show you everything. Adaobi wanted to scream, but something in his voice made her stop. Something in his eyes told her that the 5th day would change everything. And that night, as she lay awake on the mat, she made a promise to herself. Whatever secret he was hiding, she would find out. She had been sold into this marriage like she was nothing. But now she was part of something bigger. And it was only just beginning. That night, Adaobi couldn't sleep again. The air in the room felt too quiet, like something was hiding inside it. The lantern beside her had burned out. The darkness made everything worse. Her eyes stayed open as she stared at the wooden ceiling, counting the lines in the wood again and again. She had counted those lines every night for 5 nights now. Her body was tired, but her heart refused to rest. Too many questions were jumping around in her chest. Who was Mazi Chukwuemeka really? What was in the locked room? Why did those strange letters keep coming? And what would happen on this 5th day he kept talking about? Adaobi turned to look outside. Through the window, she could see his shape under the tree. He was lying on the bench again, wrapped in his thick wrapper, quiet as always. She wanted to walk out and ask him more questions, but her legs felt too heavy. Her mind was spinning, trying to guess what kind of secret could be so big that it had to wait 5 days. She turned to face the wall. The silence continued, until the phone rang. A loud, sharp sound cut through the air like a knife. Adaobi jumped. It wasn't the kind of phone she was used to. This one didn't ring like a normal phone. It made a short, strong buzzing sound. Once, then twice. Then it stopped. Adaobi held her breath and sat up quickly. Her heart beat faster and faster. She didn't even know he had a phone. She had never seen it. She tiptoed toward the door and looked outside. Chukwuemeka was no longer lying on the bench. She turned around fast. Then she heard the voice, low and quiet, from the back room. The one that was always locked. She didn't mean to eavesdrop. She didn't plan to listen. But her legs moved on their own, and before she could stop herself, she was standing near the door, holding her breath. The voice on the phone was deep, male, serious. Sir, we have a problem. They know where you are. Adaobi's eyes widened. There was silence. Then Chukwuemeka replied, in a voice she had never heard before. Calm, strong, not soft like usual. How sure are you? Very sure. They intercepted one of our men in Aba. His last message had your location. They'll come soon. We need to move. Another long silence. Then Chukwuemeka said 2 words that sent a chill down her back. Get the car. Adaobi stepped back so fast she nearly knocked over a small bucket by the wall. She ran to the mat, lay down, and pulled the wrapper over her head, her heart beating like a drum in her chest. Her mind was spinning. Who was they? Why did someone want to find him? What kind of man needs to run in the middle of the night? She lay still, hoping he didn't know she had heard him. A few minutes later, the door creaked open slowly. Chukwuemeka stepped inside, still calm, still quiet. Adaobi, he said gently. She didn't answer. He came closer. I know you're not asleep. Get up, we're leaving. Her head popped out from under the wrapper. Now? Why? Where are we going? He looked at her with tired eyes. Somewhere safe. Adaobi sat up quickly. What's going on? Who called you? What do you mean by, they know where you are? He didn't answer right away. He walked to the bag beside the stool and started packing. Just a few shirts, a small box, his wristwatch, and the same envelope with the blue seal. Adaobi stood. You said you would tell me on the 5th day. He nodded. It is the 5th day. Then tell me now. He zipped the bag and looked at her. I will, but not here. Not in this village. I need you to trust me. Adaobi stepped closer. How can I trust someone who hides everything from me? Chukwuemeka sighed. Adaobi, I did not marry you to bring you into danger. I married you to give you peace. But life is not always simple. She stared at him, her voice shaking. Are you a criminal? No, he said quietly. Then why are we running? Because there are people who don't want me alive. Adobe covered her mouth with her hand. Her legs felt weak. He came closer and placed his hand gently on her shoulder. It was the first time he had touched her. I know this is not what you expected. I know you've suffered already, but I promise you, this is not the end of your story. It's the beginning. She looked up at him. Are we safe? He nodded. As long as we move now. He handed her a small bag. Pack your things, only what you need. We leave in 10 minutes. Adobe turned slowly and picked her nylon bag. Her hands trembled as she folded her wrapper, picked her small Bible, and wore her sandals. She had nothing else. Outside, the sky was dark, but the stars were bright. She followed Chukwuemeka silently through the path leading out of the village. They didn't take the main road. They walked behind houses, through small farms, through bushes. Adobe's feet hurt, but she didn't say anything. She kept walking, stealing glances at the man beside her. He walked like someone who had done this before. His steps were quiet. His eyes scanned everything. He was no longer the slow, gentle man she met 5 days ago. He was someone else. They walked for a long time. Finally, at the edge of a narrow bush path, Adobe saw headlights in the distance. A car was parked under a tree. A man stood beside it in a black shirt, holding a phone to his ear. As they got closer, the man straightened. Good morning, sir. Thank you for coming, Chukwuemeka said. The man opened the back door of the black SUV. It was clean, quiet, smelled like leather and something expensive. Adobe climbed in slowly, her heart pounding. As the door shut behind her, she looked back at the village. It was silent, still sleeping, unaware that one of their own had just vanished into the night. They drove off without a word. No one saw them leave. Inside the car, Adobe couldn't stop staring at Chukwuemeka. Who are you? He looked at her. Let's just say, I used to be somebody important. Then I chose to disappear. Why? He leaned back against the seat and closed his eyes. Because staying alive was more important than being known. She didn't ask again. Her hands gripped the seatbelt as the car moved faster. It felt like a dream. Just 5 days ago, she was kneeling in front of a table full of cola nuts, being forced to marry a poor man in slippers. Now she was in a car that looked like something from a movie, sitting beside a man who was starting to look more like a ghost from a secret world. She turned and looked at him again. He was no longer sweating, no longer wearing old slippers, no longer acting like a man with nothing. Even in the darkness, she could see it clearly. Mazi Chukwuemeka was not poor, and he was not normal. The black SUV moved fast through the bush road, kicking up dust behind them as the driver stayed focused. Inside the car, everything was still quiet. Adobe sat stiffly beside Chukwuemeka, holding her small bag close to her chest. The engine hummed, and the air inside was cold and clean, but her palms were sweating. Every few minutes, she glanced at him. He hadn't said a word since they entered the car. He just sat there, calm like someone used to this kind of night escape. Adobe's heart kept asking the same question. Where were they going? And what was waiting for them when they got there? She turned to him again. Can you please tell me now? I've followed you. I've left everything. I've said nothing. But I need to know what's going on. Chukwuemeka took a deep breath and finally looked at her. You're brave, he said softly. I'm scared, she replied, but I'm tired of being blind. He gave her a small nod, then turned toward the window. In less than 1 hour, you will have your answers. She stared at him, confused. What's happening in 1 hour? We arrive. Adobe blinked. Arrive where? But he didn't reply. He simply closed his eyes and rested his head on the seat. The car drove in silence. It was still dark outside, but a faint light had started to stretch across the sky. Dawn was coming, and so was the truth. About 45 minutes later, the driver turned off the bush road and entered a smooth, wide road that led toward the city. Adobe had never been on a road that clean before. There were streetlights, big signboards, and fences that looked like they belonged to rich people. Then she saw it, a black gate with 2 men in suits standing in front of it. They didn't look like gatekeepers. They looked like bodyguards, serious ones. As the SUV approached, one of the men stepped forward and looked into the car. When he saw Chukwuemeka, he nodded and pressed a button. The big gate opened slowly. Adobe's mouth fell open as the car rolled in. It was like entering another world. A wide compound stretched before them, covered in clean tiles. Palm trees lined both sides. A water fountain danced in the middle of the compound, and in the background, a massive white mansion stood tall, shining under the soft morning light. It wasn't just big, it was beautiful. Is this a hotel? Adobe asked, her voice shaking. Chukwuemeka looked at her. No, it's home. Adobe's eyes widened. Your home? He nodded slowly. The car rolled to a stop in front of the steps. The driver got out and opened the back door. Sir, we've arrived. Chukwuemeka stepped out calmly. He adjusted his shirt, then reached out to Adobe. She looked at his hand for a moment, then took it. As she stepped out of the SUV, her slippers touched the cold tiles. She looked around. Guards stood in clean uniforms by the building. A maid came running from the side of the house, holding a tray with bottled water and towels. Welcome back, sir. Welcome, madam. Madam, someone just called her madam. Her mouth went dry. She stood frozen beside him, still holding his hand. He leaned closer and whispered, Take a deep breath. You'll be fine. She nodded slowly, still not believing what her eyes were seeing. He led her up the stairs and the giant doors opened before them. The living room was even more shocking than the outside. The floors were smooth and shining. A huge chandelier hung from the ceiling. The walls were painted gold and cream, with beautiful pictures in glass frames. Big chairs sat neatly in the corners, and a flat-screen TV, almost as tall as her, stood across the room. Adobe's knees went weak. She grabbed his arm quickly. Please, I need to sit. He led her to a soft couch and she sank into it. Her hands trembled. She looked around again. This is your house? She asked quietly. He nodded again. Yes. One of them. One of... Before she could finish the question, a loud voice interrupted them. So you finally came back? A tall, well-dressed man walked down the staircase. His skin was lighter than Chukwuemeka's, but his face looked similar. Sharp jaw, small nose, straight posture. He wore a black designer shirt and dark trousers. A gold wristwatch shined on his arm. Adobe quickly stood up. The man's eyes moved from Chukwuemeka to her. He frowned. Is this her? He asked coldly. Chukwuemeka stepped forward. Obinna, this is my wife. The man laughed without smiling. Wife? You disappeared for 10 years and returned with a village girl? Adobe's heart dropped. Obinna kept talking. This is what you bring to our family? What is she? A trader? A farmer? She looks confused. Chukwuemeka's eyes hardened. She is my wife, he repeated, louder this time. And I will not let you disrespect her. Obinna shook his head. You think because you were born first, you can still make decisions for this family? You walked away from everything. I had to, Chukwuemeka said. Don't talk like you're a hero, Obinna snapped. You left us to face the storm while you hid like a coward. And now you return with her? Adobe felt her face burning with shame. She whispered, maybe I should go outside. No, Chukwuemeka said firmly. You stay beside me. Obinna rolled his eyes. So what now? You think you can just step back in? You think everyone forgot what happened? I don't expect anyone to forget, Chukwuemeka said calmly. But I won't live in hiding anymore. And I won't leave her behind. Obinna pointed at Adobe. She's not one of us. She doesn't belong here. She belongs with me, Chukwuemeka replied. Silence filled the room. Obinna's eyes darkened. This house is not safe for you, brother. And it's not safe for her. Adobe swallowed hard. Was that a threat? Chukwuemeka stepped forward. If anything happens to her in this house, I will not forgive you. Obinna turned away. You shouldn't have come back. Then he climbed the stairs slowly and disappeared. Adobe stood there, still shaking. Who is he? My younger brother, Chukwuemeka said. He doesn't like me. He doesn't like anyone. Adobe sat back on the couch. Her mind was spinning. Her eyes looked around the house again. Everything was too much, too fast, too strange. I don't understand, she said. You lived in a mud house. You wore torn slippers. You ate Gary with palm oil. Why? Chukwuemeka sat beside her. 10 years ago, he began, someone tried to kill me. I survived, but I knew if I stayed, I'd be putting others in danger. So I left. I gave up the money, the name, everything. I became a ghost. He looked at her. I lived like a poor man for 10 years. I didn't speak to anyone from this house. I didn't use my real name. I didn't wear fine clothes. I didn't want to be found. Adobe's voice cracked. Then, why did you come back now? He paused. Because they found me anyway. So if I'm going to die, I won't die hiding. Her eyes widened. Die? He smiled slightly. Don't worry, I'm not planning to, but I needed to return. I needed to see this place again, before it's taken. She whispered, You mean someone wants to take it from you? He looked toward the stairs. Obina has always wanted the power, but I still carry the name. Adobe's mind felt heavy. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was rising fully now. The tiles sparkled. The Rolls-Royce she hadn't noticed before sat under a silver canopy. Its body gleamed like a mirror. It looked like a car made for kings. That's ours? She asked. Yes. She turned. Then why didn't you drive it to the village? He laughed lightly. Can you imagine what the villagers would have done if I pulled up in that car? Adobe nodded slowly. They would have worshipped you. He stood up and joined her at the window. But I didn't want someone who would worship me, he said softly. I wanted someone who would see me, even without the money. Adobe turned to him. And that's why you picked me? You didn't run when I had nothing, he said. You didn't pretend. You didn't beg. You cried, yes, but you still followed me. You still tried to understand. Adobe looked at the Rolls-Royce again. Then she smiled faintly. Can I touch it? He laughed. Of course. They walked outside together. The guards opened the gate for them with quick bows. Adobe walked slowly toward the Rolls-Royce like someone approaching a sleeping lion. The paint was deep black. The tires were shining. The silver logo on the front looked like a flying angel. She placed her hand gently on the hood. It was warm, real. This is too much, she whispered. It feels like a movie. Chukwuemeka smiled. No, Adaobi, this is real life. Yours now. She looked at him. Are you sure I deserve this? He nodded. You deserve even more. And as the morning sun bathed them in soft golden light, Adobe stood beside the car that would carry her away from the village that mocked her, away from the lies, the shame, the pain. For the first time in her life, she wasn't a poor orphan. She was the wife of a man who was once forgotten, but was now ready to rise, and she would rise with him. Adobe didn't want to leave the Rolls-Royce. She stood beside it for a long time, running her hand gently along the shiny black surface. The car felt cold under her fingers, smooth like glass. She had seen cars like this only in magazines people used to throw away at the market. Never in real life. Never this close. And definitely not as something that now belonged to her husband. She turned and looked at him. Mazi Chukwuemeka was standing by the steps of the house, talking softly to one of the guards. He looked calm, like this was all normal. Like he hadn't just pulled her out of a village in the middle of the night and dropped her in the middle of a mansion before sunrise. When he noticed she was watching him, he smiled faintly and waved for her to come inside. Adobe took a deep breath and walked back toward him, her legs still shaky. The tiles under her slippers felt cold, but the sun was now rising fully, spreading light across the compound. Come in, Chukwuemeka said. It's time you knew everything. She followed him into the living room. Everything still felt too big, too clean, too silent. Her eyes kept moving from one corner to another. There were no signs of dust, no noise from neighbors, no smell of kerosene or smoke. This was not the kind of place she grew up in. He led her to a smaller sitting room beside the main one. It had softer chairs and curtains that danced lightly as the morning breeze entered. She sat on the edge of the seat, her back straight, her hands on her lap. Chukwuemeka walked to a shelf and picked up a brown photo album. He placed it gently on the glass table between them, opened it slowly, and pushed it toward her. Start from the first page, he said. Adobe looked down. The first photo showed a young boy and a younger girl standing beside a man and woman in traditional Igbo attire. They were dressed like royalty. The man wore red beads and a lion head cap. The woman wore a wrapper made of fine lace and had gold around her neck. The boy in the photo looked like a younger version of Chukwuemeka. "That's me," he said, "and that's Obinna beside me." Adaobi looked closer. "You were rich even as a child?" He nodded. "Our father was one of the wealthiest men in the East. He owned lands, hotels, export companies. Our family name opened doors in every corner of the country." He flipped the page. More pictures, parties, schools, award ceremonies. "I grew up knowing I would take over one day. First son, first choice. Everything was mine to inherit." Adaobi looked up. "So what happened?" Chukwuemeka leaned back and rubbed his palms together. "When I was 25, I returned from studying abroad. My father was sick. He called me one night and told me to prepare. He said, 'It's time to carry the name.'" He paused, his eyes distant. "But not everyone wanted me to take over." Adobe's stomach tightened. "Obinna?" He nodded. "He was always jealous, always quiet about it, but I saw it in his eyes. The day our father signed the company documents in my name, Obinna left the house and didn't return for a week." Chukwuemeka stood and walked slowly to the window. "Then one night everything changed." Adaobi stood too, feeling the tension in the room. "What happened?" "I was driving home from a family meeting. Halfway through the express road, a black car rammed into mine. 3 men came out, armed. They shot the driver first, then opened my door and dragged me out." He turned to face her. "I should have died that night." Adaobi's hand covered her mouth. "What saved you?" "God, and a decision I made in 5 seconds." He sat down again. "One of the men aimed a gun at my head, but as he raised it, I rolled under the car and ran into the bush. I hid for hours. When it was safe, I walked barefoot till morning." Adaobi's voice shook. "Did you tell anyone?" "I called my mother first. She cried. I told her not to tell anyone else, not even Obinna." "Why not?" "Because the attack, it came from inside." Adaobi gasped. "You mean Obinna?" "I don't have proof," he said, "but he was the only one who knew my route that night, the only one who hated me enough." Adaobi shook her head slowly, still trying to understand everything. "So after that, you just disappeared?" "Yes," he said. "I left everything, my name, my wealth, my title. I changed my look, changed my voice, went far away. I had a few loyal people who helped me disappear completely." He looked at her. "That's how I ended up in your village." Adaobi sat back overwhelmed. "For 25 years, he continued, I hid. I lived poor. I kept quiet. I watched the world forget me. But weren't you afraid people would think you were dead?" "I wanted them to," he said. "If they thought I was alive, they'd keep hunting me. I had to disappear completely." Adaobi was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "Why come back now?" Chukwuemeka's eyes turned cold. "Because I've seen enough. My family's not the same. Obinna has turned the name into something dirty. He uses the companies for selfish gain. He's doing deals with dangerous people. People who started asking questions about me." "So they found you?" He nodded slowly. "I started getting letters, then strange calls. Someone left a message under my door. They said, 'If you don't return, we'll bring the past to your front door.' That was the final warning." Adaobi's hands shook. "You could have told me," she said. "I didn't want to drag you into it." "But you married me." "Yes, because I needed something real. Not for protection, not for show. Just something honest before everything turned dark again." She stood and walked to the window. "So what now?" "I fight," he said. She turned to face him. "Fight who?" "Anyone who tries to erase me again." There was a long silence between them. Then Adaobi spoke quietly. "Why did you choose me?" He looked at her. "I watched you for a long time in that village. You were strong, even when broken. You worked harder than any woman I'd seen. You never asked anyone for help. Even on the day of our wedding, you looked me in the eyes. You didn't run. You didn't curse. You just stood." Adaobi blinked fast, trying not to cry. "You remind me of my mother," he said. "I'm not strong," she whispered. "You are," he replied. "And you're going to need that strength now." Just then a loud knock came at the door. One of the guards entered quickly. "Sir, a message just came. You need to see this." He handed Chukwuemeka a white envelope with no name. The seal was broken. Chukwemeka read the paper inside. Then his face changed. "What is it?" Adobe asked. He passed the note to her. It read, "You came back, but you brought a stranger. We warned you. She will pay the price." Adobe dropped the paper like it was fire. "They want me," she whispered. "No," Chukwemeka said. "They want me, but they'll try to hurt you to get to me." He turned to the guard. "Double security. No one enters this house without being searched." "Yes, sir." The guard left. Adobe stepped forward. "You should have left me behind." "No," he said. "I'd rather die than leave you behind now." She looked into his eyes. He meant it. She could see the pain, the fear, but also the deep care. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival and love. Real love, even in a war. Adobe didn't touch her food that evening. The big dining table was full of things she had never seen before. Pounded yam in shining wraps, soup with big pieces of goat meat, rice with dry fish, fruit juice in tall glasses, even small golden spoons for dessert. But she couldn't eat any of it. She just sat quietly, watching the long corridor behind her, with the paper still burning in her mind. That note had changed everything. The words were simple but heavy. "You came back, but you brought a stranger. We warned you. She will pay the price." Adobe looked across the table at Chukwemeka. He was sitting with his arms folded, his food also untouched. His eyes didn't move. He had been staring at the same spot on the wall for minutes. The air between them was thick with silence. "Do you know who sent the note?" she asked softly. Chukwemeka didn't answer right away. He finally leaned forward and said, "I have a few guesses." She waited for more, but he didn't continue. Adobe pushed her chair back. "I'm not hungry." She stood up slowly and began to walk toward the stairs. Just as she reached the bottom step, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned quickly. Obinna stood there. His shirt was open at the top, gold chains shining on his neck. He looked relaxed, but his eyes were cold. "Are you already too big to greet me?" he asked, his voice sharp. Adobe swallowed and bowed slightly. "Good evening, sir." He stepped closer. "You're not afraid of walking around here alone?" She held her breath. I wasn't alone. I was with my husband." Obinna laughed softly. "And you think that's enough to protect you?" Adobe looked at him. "Why are you talking like this? I've done nothing to you." Obinna raised one eyebrow. "You've done nothing? You stepped into a house that doesn't belong to you. You're sitting on a throne that isn't yours. And now my brother, who hasn't been here for years, walks in like a king, dragging you behind him." "I didn't ask for any of this," Adobe replied, her voice shaking. "I didn't even want to marry him at first. But now you're enjoying the palace life, aren't you?" he said. She looked away. "I'm trying to survive." Obinna leaned closer, and his voice dropped. "Let me give you advice. Don't think love will save you in this house. Power wins here, and the person with the most secrets controls the game." Adobe's heart raced. She stepped back slowly. "Please, I don't want any trouble." He smiled, then turned around and walked off. Adobe hurried up the stairs. Inside her room, she locked the door and leaned against it, breathing heavily. The room was beautiful. The bed was wide and soft. The curtains were thick. The floor was polished. But none of it made her feel safe. This mansion had too many secrets. And now, she was in the middle of them. Later that night, she went to Chukwemeka's room and knocked gently. "Come in," he said. She entered slowly. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, holding a small leather box in his hand. "I can't sleep," she said. "I couldn't either," he replied. She sat beside him. "Your brother, he's angry." "I know," he said. "He thinks I came back to take everything." "Did you?" she asked. Chukwemeka looked down at the box. "I came back because I'm tired of hiding, but I also came back because there are things I left behind. Things I need to fix." He opened the box. Inside were old family photos, folded letters, and a small gold wristwatch. He picked up one of the letters and handed it to her. It was from their father. She read the first few lines. "My son, never forget that what you carry is not just a name, it is a responsibility." She handed it back. Chukwemeka spoke slowly. "This house is filled with people pretending to smile. But underneath, there is bitterness, envy, secrets. And now, you're here. They don't know what to do with you. Adaobi looked at him. What should I do? Be watchful, he said, and stay close to me. The next morning she woke up to a knock on her door. It was one of the maids. Good morning, madam. Madam Chinello is here to see you. Who is Madam Chinello? Adaobi asked. The family's lawyer's wife. She says she's an old friend. Adaobi got dressed quickly and followed the maid downstairs. In the living room sat a light-skinned woman in a green gown, her makeup bright and her earrings long. You must be Adaobi, she said, smiling. You're beautiful. Thank you, Ma, Adaobi replied, sitting slowly. Chinello leaned forward. I knew Chukwuemeka when he was still the golden boy of this house. I never thought he would marry someone like you. But maybe it's what he needed. Adaobi stayed silent. Chinello reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. I shouldn't be doing this, she said quietly, but you need to know. Adaobi opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a black and white photo. It was Obinna, sitting with two men she didn't recognize. One of them was holding a gun. She looked up quickly. What is this? Those are the men who attacked your husband years ago, Chinello said. The man in the middle used to work for Obinna. He was arrested once, but the case disappeared. Adaobi stared at the photo. So he really tried to kill him? Chinello nodded. You're in danger, Adaobi. He doesn't want Chukwuemeka here. And you're just a tool to get to him. Adaobi's voice was barely a whisper. Why are you showing me this? Chinello stood up. Because the last time someone tried to speak up, they didn't live long. Be smart. Be quiet. And if you ever see Obinna alone, walk away. As she left the room, Adaobi sat frozen. Her mind was spinning. Chukwuemeka came in a few minutes later. He saw her holding the photo. She told you, he said. She said it's not safe for me here. He nodded. It's not. Then why bring me? Because you're the only person I trust. That night she couldn't sleep again. She stood by the window, looking at the compound. Guards were walking around with flashlights. Everything looked peaceful, but it wasn't. Inside the mansion, war was waiting to explode, and she didn't know who would survive it. Adaobi could feel it now. The house had changed. Even though the lights still shined bright, and the guards still walked the compound with flashlights, the air inside the mansion was different, colder, heavier, like something was about to happen. For the past 2 days, Adaobi had stayed close to Chukwuemeka, just as he told her. She didn't leave her room unless he was with her. She didn't speak to any of the staff unless they spoke first. She didn't even eat if Chukwuemeka hadn't tasted the food first. It wasn't that she didn't trust anyone. It was that she didn't know who to trust. One evening, Chukwuemeka called a private meeting in his study. He invited only 3 people. Adaobi, Captain Udo, the head of his personal security, and Madame Chinello. As they sat in the room, Adaobi looked around carefully. The study was quiet and lined with shelves full of thick books. The smell of wood and old paper filled the space. No servants were allowed in. Chukwuemeka stood behind his desk, his arms folded. They're planning something, he said. Obinna has been too quiet. Captain Udo nodded. He was a tall man with a clean-shaven head and a firm voice. We've been watching his wing of the house. He doesn't talk much, but people come in and out at strange hours. One man even left through the back gate. He wasn't on the visitor list. Adaobi leaned forward. So he's hiding something. Yes, Chukwuemeka replied, and I think it's getting worse. Chinello opened her notebook. Do we confront him? No, Chukwuemeka said. Not yet. I want to catch him, not scare him. Captain Udo raised an eyebrow. Then we need a trap. Adaobi looked between them. What kind of trap? Chukwuemeka looked at her. You. She blinked. Me? If Obinna is trying to harm me, he might start with you. You're easier to reach, and he thinks you're weak. Adaobi shook her head. I'm not weak. I know, Chukwuemeka said, but he doesn't, which is exactly why it might work. Chinello leaned forward. But if we use her as bait, and he makes a move, how do we stop it in time? Captain Udo smiled slightly. We won't leave her alone. We'll let him think she's alone, but we'll be watching every step. Adaobi swallowed hard. She had been through a lot already. Married off like a product, dragged into a world of secrets, threatened. Now she was being asked to walk into danger with her eyes open, but something inside her was tired of hiding. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. Chukwuemeka looked at her gently. "Just move around the house. Act like you're relaxed, like you've stopped being afraid. If he's planning to strike, he'll do it soon, and we'll be ready." She nodded slowly. "Okay." The next morning, the plan began. Adaobi wore a bright yellow gown and walked around the house like everything was normal. She stopped at the garden. She went to the kitchen. She even walked past Obina's hallway twice. Each time her hands were sweating, but her face stayed calm. She kept remembering what Chukwuemeka told her that morning. "Don't act like a victim. Act like someone who belongs here." Hours passed, nothing happened. Then that evening, she went to the backyard alone. The sun was low in the sky. The trees cast long shadows on the ground. Birds were flying home. The air was quiet. She sat on a bench beside the small fish pond, pretending to enjoy the view. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned her head slowly. Obina. He was wearing a white shirt, holding a glass of wine. He smiled as he walked closer. "I was wondering when we'd have a moment alone," he said. Adaobi forced a smile. "It's a beautiful evening." "It is," he said, sitting beside her. "This house has many beautiful evenings, but it can also get very dark." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" Obina sipped his wine. "I mean, anything can happen, especially when strangers walk in and change everything." She said nothing. "You know," he continued, "you could have had a quiet life. You could have stayed in that village, lived simple, raised a few children. But now, you're here, in the middle of something you don't understand." Adaobi turned to face him. "Then explain it to me." Obina stared at her. Then he chuckled. "You're brave. I'll give you that." She waited. He leaned closer. "Tell me something. Do you think he'll survive this house?" "What are you planning?" she asked, her voice low. He smiled again. "Nothing. I'm just saying, people who go away for too long shouldn't come back acting like kings." "You want to be the king?" she asked. "I already am," he replied. Adaobi stood up. "I don't know what happened between both of you, but I won't be part of it. I'm not your enemy." "You are," Obina said calmly, "because he loves you, and anything he loves becomes a target." Adaobi's chest tightened. She turned to walk away. Just as she stepped forward, she heard something drop behind her. A small white envelope. Obina stood and brushed his shirt. "Give that to your husband," he said. "Tell him the clock is ticking." He walked away. Adaobi picked up the envelope slowly and walked back to the house. Chukwuemeka was waiting in the study with Captain Udo. She dropped the envelope on the table. "He said the clock is ticking." Chukwuemeka opened the letter. Inside was a picture. It showed Adaobi sitting at the fish pond, from a distance, taken without her knowing. Captain Udo's face darkened. "He's watching us." Chukwuemeka nodded slowly. "It's time." "Time for what?" Adaobi asked. Chukwuemeka stood. "We turned the trap around." That night they made the plan. Captain Udo would switch Adaobi's room. Her real room would remain locked and empty to confuse anyone watching. Hidden cameras were placed in the hallway. 2 plainclothes guards were stationed inside the room beside hers. Adaobi would pretend to go to bed early and wait. Around midnight, Adaobi lay on the bed, wide awake. The lights were off. Only the moonlight came through the window. Then she heard it, a soft creak, the door handle turning. Her heart pounded. The door opened slowly. A shadow stepped inside. The person wore a black hoodie. He moved quickly toward the bed. Adaobi stayed still. Just as he reached the bed and raised something in his hand, the lights burst on. "Freeze!" Captain Udo shouted. 3 guards jumped into the room. The man tried to run, but they caught him and pushed him to the floor. They pulled off his hood. It wasn't Obina. It was one of the kitchen workers. But in his pocket was a letter. Chukwuemeka entered the room and opened it. Inside it said, "You were warned. She is only the beginning." Captain Udo grabbed the man. "Who sent you?" The man refused to talk. They took him away. Chukwuemeka looked at Adaobi. "You did well," but she wasn't smiling. "He wanted me dead." "Yes," Chukwuemeka said quietly, "but now we have proof." They searched the man's phone. Messages, contacts, and one call made to Obina. The next morning, Chukwuemeka walked into the main living room with the guards behind him. Obina was sitting on the couch reading the newspaper. Chukwuemeka threw the phone on the table. "You sent someone to kill my wife." Obina looked up slowly. "Do you have proof?" "Your number's in his call log." Obina smiled. "So? Many people have my number." Captain Udo stepped forward. "You're under house arrest. No one leaves. No one enters." Obina laughed. "You think this is over?" "No," Chukwuemeka said. "It's just starting." Adaobi stood behind him, watching. For the first time, Obina looked nervous. The enemy inside the house had finally shown himself. And now, they were ready. The next few days passed like a storm. After the failed attack on Adaobi, everything changed inside the mansion. Obina was no longer pretending. He stopped smiling. He stopped greeting anyone. He stopped eating with the family. He stayed locked inside his wing of the house, making phone calls and giving orders through servants. But Chukwuemeka was ready now. He had all the proof. Captain Udo had pulled out phone records, camera footage, voice messages, and even bank transfers. Everything connected Obina to the attack. Even though the man they caught refused to talk, the phone he carried spoke loudly. Chukwuemeka sent the evidence straight to the board of directors that same morning. These were powerful men, old friends of their late father, investors, partners, and elders from different parts of the country. Most of them had lost respect for Obina long ago, but didn't have the courage to stand against him. Now they had what they needed. 2 days later, the board held an emergency meeting in Lagos. Adobe stayed back at the mansion, pacing the floor. She was nervous, but she also felt something new inside her. Strength. She wasn't the same girl who cried on her wedding day. She wasn't the girl who was sold for bride price. She had survived death. She had walked through fire. And now she was waiting to see her husband take back everything that was stolen from him. Later that night, as the sun went down and the lamps inside the house came on, Chukwuemeka returned. Adaobi was waiting at the top of the stairs. He didn't speak as he entered. She ran to him. "What happened?" He looked at her for a second, then smiled gently. "It's done." She gasped. "They believed you." "They didn't need to believe," he replied. "They saw the truth." He placed a small envelope in her hand. She opened it slowly. Inside was a letter stamped with the family seal. It said, "We, the board, hereby declare Mazi Chukwuemeka as the rightful head of the Obianuju family and the main holder of all company properties, titles, and decisions." Tears filled her eyes. "You got it all back." "No," he said, holding her hand. "We got it all back." That night, Obina was removed from the house. He didn't go quietly. He shouted. He threatened. But nobody listened. The guards escorted him out. He glared at Adeobi one last time. "This isn't over," he hissed. But she stood tall and replied, "Yes, it is." The next morning, the Rolls-Royce was washed and polished. The driver opened the garage slowly. Chukwuemeka stood outside in a black native outfit, looking sharp and calm. Adeobi wore a beautiful wrapper and blouse with golden beads around her wrist and neck. Her hair was braided neatly, her skin glowing under the morning sun. As she stepped into the car, reporters outside the mansion started snapping photos. One of them asked, "Sir, where are you going first now that you've taken back your throne?" Chukwuemeka smiled. "We're going home." The convoy started moving, the Rolls-Royce in front, followed by 2 black SUVs behind it. They left the city and entered the old roads that led back to the village, the same village where everything had started. As they got closer, Adaobi felt her chest tighten. She looked out the window. Everything still looked the same. The small shops, the dusty path, the children are playing with old tires, the women selling tomatoes and groundnuts on trays. But this time, everyone stopped. Heads turned, eyes widened. People dropped what they were holding, because there it was, a black Rolls-Royce with shiny tires, tinted windows, and the Obianuju family logo on the plate. As the car pulled into the village square, a large crowd gathered. Children ran after it, laughing and shouting. "Who is that?" "It's Adaobi. She came back rich." "No, it's a lie." "It's true." She married a rich man. She's wearing gold. The car stopped at the center of the square. The driver stepped out and opened the door slowly. Adobe stepped out first. The sun touched her skin gently. She stood tall, her hands calm at her sides, her face soft but strong. Then Chukwuemeka stepped out beside her. Gasps filled the air. Some people clapped without knowing why. Some people knelt. Some just stood with their mouths open. Madam Nena came running through the crowd, her wrapper tied carelessly, sweat on her forehead. "Adaobi," she shouted. "My daughter, my sweet daughter. You're back, thank God." Adaobi turned slowly. The crowd stepped aside for Nena to reach her. She dropped to her knees. "Forgive me. I didn't know. I was only trying to help you. It was poverty that made me act like that." Adaobi looked down at her. This was the woman who sold her like an item, who forced her to marry a man she thought was poor, who never showed her love. Adaobi didn't shout. She didn't insult. She simply said, "You sold me because I was weak, but I found someone who made me strong." She turned to the crowd. "I am not here to show off. I am not here for revenge. I am here to remind you that sometimes what looks like shame is just the beginning of glory." The village was silent. No one laughed. No one whispered. Then someone started clapping. Then another. And soon the whole square was full of clapping, cheering, and dancing. Children surrounded Adaobi, smiling up at her. Old women blessed her. Men bowed in respect. She and Chukwuemeka spent the whole day in the village. They donated money to rebuild the school. They gave wrappers and food to the widows. They gave scholarships to 10 children. Before leaving, Adaobi went to the stream where she used to fetch water. She stood there for a moment, remembering the heavy buckets, the long walks, and the hidden tears. Then she turned and walked back to the Rolls-Royce. This time, not as a poor girl, but as a woman who was tested and came out stronger. As the car pulled away from the village, Chukwuemeka held her hand. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She smiled. "I was thinking, maybe some pains are not punishments. Maybe they're just paths." He nodded. "And maybe the ones who start low rise the highest." She leaned her head on his shoulder. The road ahead was quiet, but her heart was full, because she knew this wasn't just the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new one where love, truth, and courage would always win.